Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday Preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined once again by a very busy Manny Lagos today. Manny, we've got a couple of exciting things going on around the club. I know you're out at Allianz Field today for a big unveiling and big ceremony. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well. You're correct. I'm actually at Allianz Field, and after this, the calling will be unveiled, which is one of the coolest things I think this club's ever done. It is so impressive. Be a lot of kind of local excited government. Dr. McGuire is going to be speaking, and I think this has been a great project by him. But ultimately, people have already seen it. We couldn't actually cover it. That's how big and impressive it is. I wore my special kind of Loons. I don't know if you guys can see that right there today, just because I was so excited about it. So yeah, another cool day at Allianz Field, which is more about the outside of Allianz Field, which is a bigger project that Minnesota United is trying to help this, what we kind of call the super block, be developed. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of partners. Obviously, the land is owned by a lot of different entities. So to get these things done and have an accomplishment is really exciting like today. And it's stunning. I mean, again, the artist is from Scotland. He has put his heart and soul into this. He's got some really cool works in Scotland. These Kelpies, if you want to look them up, that are amazing. And the Loon has a very similar kind of vibe to it. So it's going to be a cool day and super excited.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when you drive up on Allianz Field, no matter which direction you come from, it just kind of it just bursts out onto the scene, and it's awesome to see as you drive up onto the field, and really cool to see, really excited for that debut and the, I guess, unveiling, even though, as you said, hard to hide what's going on there at the corner, but excited for that. We got plenty to discuss here, Manny. We can finally now, I know last week we teased it and kind of danced around it a little bit. We can finally discuss all the machinations and possibilities for Decision Day. We'll get to that in a little bit. I want to start off, though, international break. So let's talk a little bit of U.S. men's national team. We got to see our first instances of Mauricio Pochettino as the manager of the U.S. men's national team, a 2-0 win over Panama and a 2-0 loss to Mexico. Some circumstances in that loss to Mexico for sure, and we can discuss those as well. But your initial thoughts on what you saw from Mauricio Pochettino's teams?
Well, my initial reaction, it's really nice to see him on the sidelines and to start his journey as coach of our national team. I think there's a lot of good, positive excitement, a lot of kind of nice media coverage about the initiative and how exciting it is to have a new coach and to have somebody as a foreign coach that is so well esteemed. So I think that part is really nice. I don't think it was our best window in terms of level of play. Both games, I thought we were a little bit chunky and a little bit not bringing like a high quality to the games yet. But the reality is, I think Pochettino's here to kind of assess where we are, what we have, what we don't. And then over the next, probably 6 to 12 months, really start to kind of tweak and grow into groups that he thinks are really good, how we want to play, what players should be playing, what players shouldn't. So I think we're just right at the beginning of his journey to really kind of hopefully improve this team to get ready for the World Cup.
Yeah. The circumstances around that game that I mentioned a little bit, a couple of key players, Christian Pulisic, one of them, sent home early ahead of the second friendly due to just wear and tear, injuries, not wanting to rush anything, knowing that this is a friendly. Are you okay with that? I know there was some consternation among some in the soccer press in this country that it sends a bad message. It's a friendly for me. I don't think it really sets any kind of precedent. If you're going to set anything, taking care of the players and their health and their wear and tear, I think is more important than anything for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with being honest about all of it, and I'm okay with the transparency about the challenges, particularly that's going on worldwide with the loads and the workloads of these players, particularly players that are now in Champions League and they just have all these extra games. And this fall kind of setup, there's too many FIFA windows. It's just too many. You should not have September, October, November breaks. It's just insane. Right. And then all the Champions League or our playoffs, or it's again, I really know there's a big lawsuit going on where I really hope FIFA has to take a little bit step back and looking at their mission statement in terms of how they guide and govern soccer. And are they here to try to make as much money as the leagues and the teams themselves? I don't think so. I think there has to be a little bit of a deep breath by them and say, hey, we're here to kind of help guide and govern the sport, not monetize it the way I think the leagues try to do. So I don't have an issue with that. But if I'm being fully transparent, I do have an issue with the quality of play and the effort in terms of we should have enough depth and enough like players that get called in that have to come together and both combine the quality we have and the effort and good soccer. And so, again, this has nothing to do with Pochettino. I don't think he had any control over this, but I just don't think it was a good window. I think the Panama game was chunky. I don't think we had a lot of long spells of really good soccer and playing well. And I think the Mexican game was the first time in a long time that we didn't compete like we usually do against Mexico. So I think those are very fair to say. And I don't think the reason is because Christian Pulisic had to go home.
Right.
It wasn't that. I mean, there's a lot of other reasons. We didn't start well. We didn't move the ball well. We got kind of lost in our duels. We didn't have guys in the field that we were hungry enough to kind of solve problems. So ultimately, I think both are kind of true. And I expect no matter what that we compete against Mexico because they're one of our biggest rivals, and we didn't this window. So that's all it is. It means we've got to get better. Again, that's why we have a coach who we believe will help us get better.
I've seen some talk online after the Mexico game and after some of the players going home that there seemed to be some concern over a depth issue with the U.S. men's national team pool. Do you think that's the case, or do you think just it's other extenuating circumstances? It's not the team not playing well against Mexico on Tuesday night.
I think it's the combination of the team not playing well. I mean, the depth thing is going to be there always. You can always make that excuse. Like I said, that's why I'm not going to buy completely excuse of like, you got to have your best players for this game against Mexico always. But no, there's circumstances come up. You have injuries. We're going to have adversity when we play all teams in all games, and there's always going to be injuries or issues coming up. So I just don't like using excuses for the national team. Whoever steps in that field should be ready to play and go and try to win the games. And that is incredibly important, massively important. So do I think that the right level of quality was on the field that day? Probably not. I've got some personal opinions about certain players that I don't think are at the level of the national team, but that's up for our new coach to figure out how to do that. And so again, he learned a lot in this window about what he has, what he doesn't. Hopefully over the next 6 to 9 months, he'll even bring in more people and learn what he likes and what he doesn't. But ultimately, I think we have a lot of different types of players playing around the world that give us enough of an opportunity, particularly CONCACAF teams, particularly probably the worst Mexican team in 3 decades, that we should compete. So if anybody's going to say, we don't have enough quality or depth, well, I get that if maybe we're playing France or Holland, but not Mexico at this point. Don't make those excuses. I mean, we should wake up this week and be like, we got to do better against Mexico. That's unacceptable.
For sure. Absolutely should, considering the problems they're having with their national team at this point. Let's jump right into MLS Decision Day because there's so much to break down here. Before we get to the Western Conference, a couple notes on the Eastern Conference side. Miami 1 point away from setting the MLS points record on 71 points at the moment. They'll be playing a New England Revolution side that are just not good this season, have not been good, already eliminated, looking for the season to end almost essentially. That seems almost like it's going to happen, that they are going to break, Inter Miami are going to break the single season points record. 2 playoff spots still up for grabs in the Eastern Conference, none in the Western Conference, just seeding in the Western Conference, but 2 spots up for grabs in the East. I think this, despite the fact that there are no playoff spots left to grab in the Western Conference, I still think I'm more excited about what's at play in the West because of the orders and the machinations of the games that you could have than what I'm seeing in the Eastern Conference on Decision Day.
Yeah. I mean, the machinations of where teams can end up in the West, even though the playoffs have been decided in terms of who's in and who's out, I think are going to be really fascinating. If I start with the East and we start with the top, Miami, I mean, they've got the greatest player of all time. He had a hat trick in this international break. It looks like he is just loving soccer again and loving playing and playing at such a high level that it is truly amazing. Go watch those highlights of his goals too against Bolivia. They are unbelievable. But I will say, I think that matchup's more intriguing just because the team they're playing is the team that currently holds the MLS records for points. So I don't think it's going to be as much of a pushover game. I do think New England will have a lot of pride and club history to play for, that I think they'll push on the guys to see if they can actually get that done and make it a tough game, a tough setting. So for me, I'm excited to see if New England can show up and push Miami to say, hey, we've got a little pride and want to keep that record. If you stay in the East, it really comes down to DC and Montreal, whether they can get a point or not. If they can't get a tie or a win, then obviously Toronto and Philadelphia, I'm sorry, not Toronto, Philadelphia and Atlanta have a shot. It's a long shot, but it comes down to really probably that Montreal NYCFC game in Montreal would be really big because the NYFC really is playing to maybe sneak above Orlando. So there's some intrigue there. I do think, like you said, Philadelphia and Atlanta need a lot of things to happen. But you never know. That's why Decision Day is one of my favorite days of the year. I mean, there's a lot of excitement right now where we're not quite sure. And the stress of it does really create some chaos throughout the league.
Is the East going to come down to Miami, Columbus? Do you see anybody else in the Eastern Conference competing for the Eastern Conference title and for the chance to go to the MLS Cup final? Or can Cincinnati or Orlando or New York City do something and go on a run and make some noise in the Eastern Conference playoffs?
Well, I think the East is very top heavy, the best, strongest in the league. The four there, that's Orlando, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Miami, are all incredibly good teams, incredibly well balanced, and have had really good balanced years where they've pretty much played well most of the year. Cincinnati maybe dipped at home a little bit this year, and Orlando had a little bit of a kind of hiccup.
They started off a little rough, and they really caught fire late.
Yeah, but they've been so consistent in the second half of the year. So I would say it has some elements of you knock out teams and then you see what happens after the knockouts because those top four are so heavy. But you do have NYCFC playing some of their best soccer right now and very dangerous in a different way. And then the Red Bulls are kind of a playoff team that could make an upset just because they're so solid defensively that they're one of those teams that could sneak a win. So if there's any upset to happen, that just, kind of has a rambles and has a ramification throughout the rest of the standings. So for me, very top heavy, but once there's an upset that happens, a ton of things can happen within the East.
For sure, absolutely. So let's jump into the Western Conference, and I know we'll just focus on the Loons for this one. A big game this weekend for Minnesota United against St. Louis. We'll break that down and preview it a little bit later on in the show, but there are plenty of consequences on the line for Minnesota. With a win and some other results going their way, they could jump up to 52 points and possibly as high as fifth. They can finish anywhere from 5th through 8th place due to Vancouver's 2-1 loss to LAFC at the weekend, which let's just talk about that game for a second. What an incredible back and forth game. Just drama all over the place. An early goal for LAFC, Vancouver claw back in, and then a last minute goal for LAFC. Just an incredible game between those two sides at the weekend that if you were a Loons fan watching that game, obviously rooting for LAFC due to the consequences in the playoffs, but man, that was an excellent game at the weekend.
It really was. I mean, I would say if you only watch the second half, you're like, how did Vancouver lose this game?
Yeah.
I mean, they were all over them, creating chances off the post, off the line. It seemed like there was only one way that game was going to go, which was either going to be LAFC was going to eke out a tie or they were going to lose and Vancouver was going to score. And then you blink and the next thing you know, LAFC has a nice counterattack, couple fresh legs. And then Elias Sanchez, who's not really a goal scorer, just crushes a kind of 20-yard bomb, hits the post and goes in. And you blink and you're like, oh my gosh, it's another great result for Minnesota United. So over the last month, we've had a lot of results that have made us feel very lucky to be in the position we are. But you've heard me say it, you create your own luck. Yep. And we created our luck by us having an outstanding month, 4 straight shutouts, 3 of 4 games on the road, and really in a position now to potentially be in 5th if we win, or 6th. I mean, I think those are very likely scenarios on this decision day that both Houston and Colorado will potentially drop points. And at the very least, we control our destiny for 7th. And that's unbelievable in itself going to decision day, that we are in a space where we could lose and be 8th, but if we win, at least 7th and a good chance of 6th or 5th. Unbelievable. What an amazing couple months for Minnesota United, for the staff, the club. Just an outstanding trajectory of a wild year that I think we're in a good space.
So let's break this down. Loons win, should they win on Saturday, and Houston and Colorado both drop points, both lose against their opponents. Houston playing LA Galaxy, Colorado playing Austin. The Loons will jump up to 5th place and will take on Real Salt Lake in the first round. Should one of those teams win or draw, I believe, or just win, if one of those teams should win and the Loons still get a win, they will move up to 6th. If the Loons win and both those teams win, then they'll stay at 7th, controlling their destiny. As you said, a tie makes things a little tricky, and a loss also does as well. But everything's on the line from 5th to 8th place. If I'm going to be honest, Manny, I'm looking at the first round opponent in the playoffs. I want either 5th or 7th place. I don't want 6th because I don't want to take on Seattle.
Oh, I couldn't disagree more.
Really? You want Seattle in the first round? You want it?
Seattle.
You want the beast?
Listen. It's been a tough history for Minnesota, but I would rather take it head on in one of those middle kind of matchups between 3v6 or 4v5. 100% out of all the teams, bring on Seattle. I mean,
Really?
let's face our challenges head on, for sure.
Okay.
For sure. Yes.
Man, I'm so against that decision. I would rather avoid the team that
I don't like your fear. No fear.
That's fine.
This team's playing well. I think there's the teams that don't have the home field advantage. I think by far out of the 9, the top 4 and then the other 5, I think we're the most that teams don't want to play right now. So
absolutely,
bring on Seattle. Let's bring on that fear.
I think there are two teams. If you look at the Western Conference playoffs right now, I think there are 2 teams that really teams don't want to play in the West, and it's Seattle and Minnesota. Every other team, you can make a case for wanting to play them. Real Salt Lake, they've been kind of slumping down the stretch. Houston and Colorado, the same. Houston's got some injuries that are going to certainly make their playoff runs a little bit difficult for them. LAFC, for me, if I'm having to choose a wild card game and playing LA Galaxy in the first round, should you make it through that wild card game, or getting 7th place and facing LAFC, I would rather play LAFC. Despite the talent they have on the field, I would rather play LAFC because they played 13 games over this same stretch that Minnesota have played 9, and they've got a much older team than Minnesota. So I think I'd rather take them. But I think if you look at the Western Conference playoffs, there are 2 teams in really excellent form right now, and it's Seattle and Minnesota, and everybody else kind of just looks at those teams and doesn't want any part of them.
Yeah, and I prefer dreaming big. That's why I kind of want to get 5th, because there could be some upsets, and then we could have another home game.
Yep,
as a knockout game. So I think there's a great story here. If we get 5th, and then where the West is, it's wide open, and 5th could mean that we actually play a conference final here in Minnesota. So again, it's an exciting weekend. I'm excited because we put ourselves in a great position to really, we don't control 5th, but we control a likelihood if we win that 5th or 6th feel really achievable. And I also like, like I said, I like our matchups going into whatever, if it's a wild card game, I like that matchup, Vancouver or Portland. And I like our matchup if we're, playing Seattle. I like it all. Like I said, it's exciting right now. We're just playing good soccer.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. How big of a home field advantage will that be? Early November soccer in Minnesota, should certain things break the right way. The Loons finish 5th, get home field advantage in the next round should a couple upsets happen. How big of a home field advantage will late Minnesota weather soccer be for that game?
I mean, I would say the fans have shown up all year. I think if there's one kind of negative, I don't think we've been as sharp and as dominant as home as we probably would have liked to going into this area. But the feeling of the last game against Colorado and the dominance, and then you add in the weather along with our great fans. Oh, I think it would be so fun. I mean, to make a run into November with these fans, with this stadium, with the way the team's playing, you got to be excited. You got to be excited about wherever we end up. I think the team will be ready to try to make a real run at this.
Absolutely. Other Western Conference storylines for Decision Day: LA Galaxy and LAFC in a bit of a battle for first place in the Western Conference. It'll take a little bit of work for LAFC to do it. They have to win by more than 2 goals against San Jose. LA Galaxy have to lose, and the goal differential will obviously come into play in that one. LAFC have to win by more than 2 goals, then LA Galaxy lose by, I guess is essentially the easiest way to say it, if I'm making sense. But LAFC can still take first place should they win and beat San Jose, and LA Galaxy lose to Houston this weekend. Do we think that's likely, or do we think 1 and 2 are set and we should expect the Galaxy to take the Western Conference?
I feel like on paper, people are going to say the Galaxy are going to figure out a way to get this game done. My brain, ironically, I feel like a lot of decision days for the Galaxy have been against Houston at Houston, and those games have been wild and they've been tough. And so I think it's going to be a tougher ask than Galaxy, but I think they'll figure out a way. They really have dealt with a lot of adversity, a lot of kind of who's the best team in LA for the last, 5 or 6 years, and it's been undoubtedly LAFC. And this year, I think everybody probably is going to pick the Galaxy. Has been consistently better all year. So my guess is that the Galaxy is going to find a way and take that top spot.
By the way, Galaxy, while we're talking about them, Gabriel Peck, newcomer of the year, or are you picking Luis Suarez? I mean, I throw that one just right on you.
Yeah, there's a good case for both. I would say I was one of the doubters of Suarez to really make an impact. I forgot how close he was to Messi and how that might galvanize him to really take care of his body and push his mind and physically and mentally, do what he's been doing his whole career, which is proving people wrong, which he proved me completely wrong. Probably Suarez in the end, although Peck is definitely, really had a great second half of the year and is really, he was a little bit, I would say not quite as sharp early in the year, whereas Suarez has been pretty consistent all year in terms of finding ways to score and make an impact. So probably Suarez, just because I was completely wrong and he proved me wrong.
Yeah, I think there's a very good case, as you just kind of pointed or displayed there. There's a very good case for both of them, and it'll be very interesting to see how the voting breaks out for that one. Just because the Loons are away doesn't mean you have to watch the match from home. With Loons Watch Spots presented by Coors Light, you can find a piece of that Allianz Field atmosphere at some of your favorite Twin Cities locations. Check out the full list of locations and upcoming watch parties at MNUFC.com/Loons Watch Spots. Plenty on the line. Portland locked into that wild card game. Vancouver, if they win and a couple other results go their way, they could sneak up into the first round, bye right into the first round, skip the wild card game. But plenty that we'll be watching as decision day kind of breaks out. And it's always one of my favorite broadcasts of the year because there's just so much going on. And I'll be excited to have you join me in the opening segment. Dan Terror will be off for the radio broadcast. His son is getting married, so congratulations to the Terhar family for that one. So we'll have a rotating cast of guests to come through the broadcast booth with us. That broadcast will start at 7:30 p.m. on 1500 ESPN with kickoff about 8:15 p.m. Across the Western Conference. Looking forward to it. So let's jump right into this, unless you have any other comments about the Western Conference decision day, or I guess decision day in general, Manny.
No, it's going to be a fun day. Obviously, the Eastern Conference games start at 5 Central and the Western Conference starts at 8. So a good chance to kind of follow the Eastern Conference and then really take a deep breath and get ready for our kind of shuffling of how this will play out in terms of who is where going into the playoffs in terms of seeding.
For sure. And the games that Loons fans will have to keep up to date on their score apps. Austin, Colorado. It is Houston, LA Galaxy, Real Salt Lake, Vancouver, and Seattle, Portland a little bit, but less so than those other three. So plenty of matches that we'll all be keeping our eyes on throughout the evening at Allianz Field. So let's jump right into this. Minnesota hosting St. Louis, a game that is a rematch from a game about a month ago now. A 3-1 win for the Loons back then in St. Louis. Minnesota 2-0 when they take trips down to St. Louis. Though since that time, St. Louis, though they've been eliminated from the playoffs and they're already planning for their offseason, 3 wins in the 4 games since that loss. One loss as well in that time, a 1-0 loss to LAFC a couple weeks ago. But they have gotten their scoring boots going, scoring multiple goals in each of those wins, 2, 3, and 3 goals in those 3 wins. This is a team that really isn't going away quietly, despite being eliminated and despite having nothing to play for.
Yeah, I'm so excited for Saturday night. I think the stadium's gonna be rocking. I think the fans are really excited for us to put on a good performance and try to see if we can even push higher up this playoff standings. And it's not an easy game. I think St. Louis has a really formidable attack. I think right now Betcher and Klaus together is really tough. You know, if you think about the St. Louis game, that first 10 or 15 minutes, they really hit us hard. They're really good at being direct and over the top and really created some good chances. It took us a little while to kind of breathe in and get into the game. And then, you know, the last probably 60 minutes, I thought we were outstanding in that game. We really took over and really kind of took over the tempo, took over the chances. And really by the end, when you look back, it was like a great game. But that first 10 or 15 minutes, it reminded us that St. Louis has a really good roster. They've had a lot of adversity and things not go their way. But they're a better team than the fact that they're not in the playoffs. And so I think we're playing somewhat of a team that probably should have been in the playoffs just from a roster perspective. And that means they're dangerous. And that means that we have to really be ready and sharp and focus not on what happens around the league and not even what happens if we go to the playoffs. This is the game that we have to use our ability to control our destiny by getting the 3 points.
So let me ask you this, since you talked a little bit about it there and kind of hit on it, which is the more, I guess, where do you see the St. Louis side? Because obviously last year they finished first place in the Western Conference in their first ever year in Major League Soccer. This year it has not gone as well. 12th place right now. They could finish anywhere from 10th to 12th, depending on their result on decision day. What is the real St. Louis team? Where do you think they sit in the hierarchy of the Western Conference, despite their poor form this year and taking into account their excellent form last year?
Well, they've made a lot of changes and they've shifted a little bit. Obviously, there's been coaching changes that happened, and I think for me, I think their integration of their new signings, which I think are pretty good, just haven't quite integrated in time for them to kind of make an impact and be in and around the playoff discussion. So I think next year they will definitely be in that kind of middle playoff discussion, and maybe if they have another good transfer window, that they could also be like where we are, where we expect to hopefully be in the top 4 discussion next year. So again, this is a team that, like I said, the roster itself probably is a playoff team, but other scenarios and other things happen this year that put them a little bit lower. And so that's why I said this weekend is going to be a challenging game, because we're playing against a good roster, against a team that I think will bring it all to. I think they want to show their fans going into next year that this was kind of a blip, and they're more like the team that kind of started out in MLS as one of the more historic expansion teams in history. So it's a fascinating lineup. I look at them individually. I kind of mentioned Klaus and Betcher are really a good tandem. They're different. Klaus is great in the air. He kind of loves to get in the box and use his physicality. Betcher's just this kind of wiry, kind of good finisher that makes good runs in behind, that looks to get in behind. So they kind of have a good tandem of those two. Lowen is a really skilled number 10, loves set pieces, loves to go find the ball. If he finds it too deep, that's good for us. So like when we played them, he was really probably getting the ball in spots that weren't really dangerous. When he's really dangerous is when he gets the ball higher up the field in spots that he can actually make deliveries to Klaus and Betcher. But he can have games. He can have worldly games, to be honest, because he does have that kind of quality. He's a little bit older, doesn't quite get around the field as much as maybe a traditional kind of younger number 10 in our league, but he is going to be very dangerous. And they have a goalie that on his day can be the best goalie in the league. He really is that great. He's had that great of a career. And he can have a worldly of a game that can really stymie you for creating chances and scoring goals.
I think the Roman Berkey signing has been instrumental for them. I think that was one of the signings when you saw, I think it was one of their first signings, wasn't it? When they got announced to be joining Major League Soccer, it was one of their big first signings. And you kind of look at it like you're spending DP money on a goalkeeper, and it's absolutely paid off for them. In net, as he's been, as you said, one of the best goalkeepers in the league. A guy that also should get the love. Cedric Toishard scored the first goal in that match a couple weeks ago. Only played 9 games for them this season. 5 goals and 4 assists in those matches, though. He's been instrumental to kind of this good run that they've been on over the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I just mentioned that they had some signings in the transfer window that are still kind of integrating into the team. It's probably more for next year. Well, it is more for next year at this point. But even if they're in and around the playoff run, he's been great. He's been really, really solid. So, quick, fast, good finisher, good runner. Like I said, they have some pieces now where I think this game we will have to play really well to get the points. This is not a game we're going to have a team that's just going to lay down and say we're out. We're thinking about next year. They will not want to get swept by us, and they'll bring it. Like I said, we are going to have to be really sharp to walk off the field with 3 points this weekend.
Absolutely. And you mentioned in that game a couple weeks ago in St. Louis, they really did like to just try and play over the top. It felt like time after time, they sent these long, high arching passes, trying to just go route one over the top of Minnesota. What's the keys to playing against that for this Loons defense that has been in excellent form over the past month and a half or so?
Well, I think it's making sure we're smart early in terms of I've said this for the last couple of weeks where we've done really well is being organized and compact, winning our battles in the middle of the field, closing down at the appropriate time. And if we're not able to close down and they have some time to create service, making sure our center backs are ready to not have the high line. When you have the high line and you don't have pressure, that's when you get caught. When your center backs are really at their best, is the high line's there when we're organized, compact, and we have good pressure, but we have to drop a little bit if they have time and space to play over the top.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to this match. There's just so much that is on the line for Minnesota. Not as much for St. Louis, but they clearly they haven't packed it in and gone away. Clearly playing for whoever's going to be manager there next year. And certainly will be interesting to watch them this offseason. And I'm really looking forward to this game. Kickoff 8:15. Broadcast starts with us at 7:30 p.m. on 1500 ESPN, 8 p.m. on MLS Season Pass. Looking forward to that. Any other notes before we start the final segment and kind of predict these games that will impact the Loons?
No, I would say, like I said, I think it's going to be important we move the ball well. Again, I felt like the combination of how well we possessed the ball in good spots and finished plays off in a way that they couldn't counterattack. They couldn't kind of play those vertical passing after the first 10 or 15 minutes of that game in St. Louis is going to be massive. So having our guys make good decisions on the ball and get forward in the right way, but all keep our compactness is going to be massively important in this game. Because I do think we kind of did a good job of having them run up ideas by the second half. And they really did. I think that game in St. Louis really started to set a tone of how we can play defensively, I think, even though we got scored on. But we had large spells on the road where they wanted to get back in the game, whether we were up a goal or 2 goals, and they just couldn't because our defensive shape was so good. We were moving the ball. We were possessing the ball with a lead, which I think is so important for this team to do. It's a little bit like the game in Colorado early on, when in Colorado, we couldn't find a way when we had the lead to move the ball, and kind of our best defense was keeping the ball. And when Colorado came here a couple weeks ago, we were outstanding at it. So to me, it really is important that we step on the field, not only for this game and for controlling potentially more of our destiny for the playoffs, but also for mentally going into the playoffs, that we have the same kind of tempo and rhythm that we've had for the last 4 games, which is lockdown defense, good decision making, and we'll find goals. The way Kelvin's been playing and the runs he's been making, along with our other kind of offensive weapons right now, the goals will come if we have that good defensive shape.
For sure. And I know there'll be a more concentrated breakdown of the season as a whole, but we're going into the final game of the season. What's been your big takeaway from the season? A lot of adversity, obviously. Eric Ramsey not coming in until a couple weeks into the season. Good run to begin the season, a rough middle patch, and then it really picked it up since that Leagues Cup break. What's been your overall takeaway from this season as we head into the final game of the regular season?
Yeah, I think it's probably what you just mentioned there, a season of ups and downs that's finishing on and up. I mean, with extremes, an extremely great top of the table first starter, one of the top teams in the league to start the season, and then a huge dip to our we were honest about it. It was our most historic losing streak of the club, even going back to the Thunder Stars days. So the bounce back from that as a club, as a staff, the fans' patience to kind of see us try to grow into this year and where we are now is, to me, the story of the season. And it's the story of why I think we should be so excited about this final game, which is essentially a playoff game. And then giving our fans a home playoff game is so special. We talked about it a couple episodes ago where in 19 we had a great year. I think we were like this year prepared to make a playoff run. It didn't happen. We didn't play that well at home. Maybe some roster decisions, maybe some just not quite showing up. I think we were by far the better team that day against the Galaxy and just didn't quite have it all fit. But giving our fans a home playoff game outside of COVID since 19, awesome. So excited. I mean, there's nothing like playoff soccer. It's unique to this country. It's unique to kind of our sports, and there's nothing like it. And the players feel it and experience it. And it's one of my favorite things and my favorite experience for the fans as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, my biggest takeaway is just finding these key pieces for the future. I mean, we always knew that Hassani Dotson had this level in him, but he's never played at the level that he's been playing at over the last couple months. He's been excellent in that midfield. You have Kelvin Yeboah up top. Bringing him in the midseason has been a revelation. 7 goals in his 8 appearances for the club since joining. Tani Oluwaseyi bursting onto the scene early on. You'd like to see him pick that back up. Bangukle Longwane taking over late in the season as well. Just having these pieces and getting kind of these foundational pieces for the next couple of years. I think for me, that's been my biggest takeaway, an exciting piece for the future of this club, and looking forward to seeing how they play on Saturday, excuse me. Manny, before we let you go and get off to probably more important things than talking about a game on Saturday, let's get the predictions for these 3 games that we'll be most importantly watching. The first one, Austin hosting Colorado. If Colorado loses and Minnesota win, Minnesota could jump up as high as 5th or 6th place. Manny, your prediction for this one?
I mean, if anybody's been listening to the show, it's Austin. I mean, there's no question I'm going to be a homer, but no, there's a little bit more to it as well. Colorado's been poor on the road. I mean, they do not have a good road record. They've been great at home, but they've really struggled on the road. So I'm going Austin for sure.
Yeah, and I think Austin, after parting ways with their manager over the past couple weeks, I think that'll be a squad that knows that there's going to be big changes in the offseason, and some of those players will want to make proof that, or put out there on tape that, hey, I can stay here, I can be a part of what you're building in the future, or I can be a part of whatever team wants me next. And so there'll be some players that clearly motivated to play for their futures at the weekend. And as you said, Colorado poor on the road, 5-9-2, went away from Colorado this season. I think I'm going to take Colorado here in this one. Going back to the schedule tab, Houston, LA Galaxy. Galaxy need just a win or a draw to claim first place in the Western Conference for the playoff run. Houston struggling with injuries of late. Should they lose or draw, they could find themselves down in 7th place in the Western Conference. Your expectation and prediction for this one?
I've got a 2-2. No, let's go 3-3 draw. Something crazy. Ooh. This is going to be an MLS decision day, like just all over the place. Like, can't predict what's going to happen. 3-3. Crazy though.
You mentioned earlier LA Galaxy finishing their seasons at Houston a lot. Wasn't it a couple years ago where they had a chance to play for the right to get into the playoffs, and they were at Houston and they just laid a complete egg?
Yep.
Am I remembering that correctly?
Yep.
Yeah. So
yep.
There's certainly some demons in late season games for the Galaxy in Houston. I want to see the Galaxy win because it means a better chance for the Loons to pop up in the Western Conference, but also a draw would be add to the drama of the night. I think I'm going with an LA Galaxy win, though I'm not a fan. I am a fan of that result. So I think I'm going LA Galaxy win. The final game that we'll be watching.
By the way, I just want to make sure a tie and we win is still good for us.
Still good. Yeah. Still good for us. The final game we'll be watching, Real Salt Lake, Vancouver. Vancouver wins and we draw or lose. They can jump us in the Western Conference standings and put us back into the wild card round, which we would host against Portland the following Wednesday. Your prediction for this one? Real Salt Lake struggling lately. Vancouver struggling as well. Clearly just some bad performances for Vancouver lately, though they've been putting in good shifts. It's just the results have not been going their way. What's your expectation for this one? I think this one may be the most wild game of the weekend based off how these two teams go into this one.
Yeah. So Jonathan, I got to call you out here. Did you just say Vancouver's been putting in good shifts of late?
I feel like the second half agaid LAFC,
That's it. They've laid an egg against Seattle at home.
Yeah, that's fair.
For 90 minutes.
That's fair.
They laid an egg against us at home for 90 minutes.
That's fair.
They had 45 minutes out of 3 games at home. No,
Fair.
There's no way, and they're going to lose. I mean,
Well,
not for sure, but I'm predicting RSL for sure. Like
okay.
at home, RSL's been
like
very
it.
good this year. They've dropped a little bit of late, but Vancouver's been in a tailspin. When you have 3 games at home,
Yeah,
to
that's
kind
fair.
of go up the table and you get 0 points, maybe
Do you
they
think
eke a tie, but no, I think RSL will win this one.
so? Vancouver loses. Portland they're at Seattle. Can Portland jump Vancouver and get that home playoffs, the home wild card game? Or is
Uh,
Seattle just too good at this point, and that's a really tall task for Portland?
but I'm going to kind of be the hypocrite now because I just came at you about that. I think this is like the Galaxy Houston, where I do think Portland has a chance. Like I do
Okay.
think, Portland is good enough offensively that they've kind of done a similar thing where they've been kind of struggling to score goals at home. The difference is I think they have goals in them, and eventually they'll come out. So this is one of the ones where I could see an upset. So I'll take Portland. I'll take
Okay.
Portland beating Seattle here and kind of their offense waking up and surprising Seattle.
And say their offense has been struggling of late. Just 1 goal in their last 3 games. Their defense has been shipping goals as well. And we've talked about Portland's defense quite a bit on this show over the season. Just hasn't been great for them in Portland. So that will be also an exciting game to watch for sure. Manny, I am looking forward to Decision Day. So much on the line. It's going to be exciting. And I can't wait to bring it to everybody on 1500 ESPN for the radio broadcast, the TV broadcast on MLS Season Pass starting this Saturday at 8 p.m. as well. The last regular season game of the season, playoff spots and seating on the line. Looking forward to it, Manny.
Likewise, it's exciting. It's going to be a beautiful night Saturday. I think the weather's going to be great. Chilly. Make sure you kind of bundle up. 8 o'clock's a little bit, an hour later start time, and our nights and mornings have been cooler. But perfect weather for soccer. Perfect weather for the guys in the field to really put a good 90-minute shift in. I can't say more about that. I mean, it's going to be a fun soccer Saturday for the country and for Minnesota United.
Absolutely looking forward to it. All the Western Conference games kicking off at the same time. Eastern Conference games kicking off at the same time as well earlier in the day. Exciting times. Decision Day almost at hand, Loons fans. We'll talk to you next week, whether it's before a wild card game, which will be earlier in the week, obviously, or if it's for a first round game, we'll talk to you later in the week as well. Looking forward to it, Manny, and we'll talk to all you Loons fans next week sometime.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.